They called it the perfect New Year's Eve, while I called it the biggest unpaid shift of my life. My mom texted to say 200 people had confirmed, and my dad added that I would handle it all just like every year. I agreed in my most obedient voice before I put the phone down and vanished. What stunned the entire family was not my absence, but the surprise I left behind that nobody saw coming. My name is Alara Whitfield, and if you asked the 3,000 employees at Northgate Medical Group what I actually did for a living, most would say I was the person who made problems disappear. I was the administrative coordinator. A title that sounded professional but really meant I was the professional fixer of logistical nightmares. At 33 years old, I had become exceptionally good at smoothing over cracks, silencing alarms, and ensuring that chaos looked like organized efficiency. But as I stepped out of the sliding glass doors into the biting December wind of Hollow Creek, Pennsylvania, I felt less like a coordinator and more like a battery that had been drained to its final 1%. The cold here was not just a temperature, it was a physical assault. It whipped around the concrete corners of the parking garage, stinging my cheeks and finding the gaps in my wool coat. I lowered my head against the gale, clutching my phone like a lifeline, just wanting to reach the sanctuary of my sedan and turn the heater up to 80 degrees. My phone vibrated in my hand, a sharp, demanding buzz that cut through the wind. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was. My stomach gave a familiar, hollow lurch, a Pavlovian response to the ringtone I had assigned to the parents. I slid into the driver's seat, slamming the door against the cold, and swiped to answer. Alara. My mother's voice was bright, too loud, and vibrating with an energy that I knew immediately was not joy. It was manic determination. Thank God you picked up. Your father and I just left the country club. Hi, Mom, I said, my voice sounding thin in the freezing car. I just got off work. It's been a long day. Well, wake up, honey, Denise Whitfield said, ignoring my fatigue as if it were a minor scheduling error I needed to correct. We have big news. We decided to go ahead with the branding for this year. We are calling it the perfect New Year's Eve. I stared at the frost forming on the bottom of my windshield. What? The perfect New Year's Eve, she repeated, enunciating every capital letter. The Millers did Winter Wonderland last year, and it was tacky. Plastic snowflakes. Can you imagine? We need to reclaim the standard. Elegant, timeless, perfect. Before I could process the weight of that adjective, I heard a rustling sound, and then my father's voice boomed through the speakerphone. Gordon Whitfield did not speak. He broadcasted. 200 people. Alara, my father announced. We just got the final confirmations. The list expanded a bit. The Montgomerys are bringing their in-laws, and your mother invited the new partners from the firm, plus some distant cousins from Ohio, who we haven't seen in 10 years. It's going to be a full house. 200. The number hung in the recycled air of my car. 200, I repeated, my brain automatically doing the math I did not want to do. 200 people meant 30 round tables if we were seated, or a flowing layout if we did cocktails. It meant at least 600 hors d'oeuvres if we wanted to avoid looking stingy. It meant a logistics operation that rivaled the hospital wing I managed. Dad, that is double what we had last year. New Year's Eve is in 4 days. Exactly, he said, his tone dismissive of the panic rising in my throat. That is why we called now. You need to get a head start. We told everyone you are handling it, just like every year. You know how your mother gets stressed with the vendors. You are better at the details. But 200 people, I tried again, my hand gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I haven't booked a caterer. Every decent place in Hollow Creek has been booked since October. I can't just... Alara, don't start with the negativity, my mother cut back in. We don't need a caterer if you manage the sourcing correctly. Remember that lovely beef tenderloin you did 3 years ago? The one with the truffle reduction? We want that. And Gordon wants the seafood station again, but fresh. Alara, not frozen. The Thompsons are coming, and you know he owns a dealership. We cannot look cheap. The word perfect began to dismantle me. In the Whitfield dictionary, perfect had a very specific expensive definition. It meant the house had to look like a spread in a glossy architectural digest. It meant fresh hydrangeas imported from somewhere warm, even in the dead of winter. It meant vintage champagne, not sparkling wine. It meant I would spend the next 96 hours driving between 3 different counties, fighting crowds, cooking until my feet swelled, and scrubbing the baseboards because the cleaning crew missed a spot. "I have work until the 30th, I said weakly. "Take a sick day," my father said. It was not a suggestion. "This is family. We are hosting the event of the season. Don't let us down." And then, the reflex kicked in. It was a survival mechanism I had honed over 3 decades of being their daughter, the path of least resistance. "Okay," I whispered. "I will handle it." "Good girl," my father said. "We knew we could count on you. Make us look good." The line went dead. I sat there in the silence, the engine idling, the heater finally starting to blow lukewarm air. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of anxiety and dread. I felt like I had just signed a contract with the devil without reading the fine print. Except the devil was my mother and the hell was a kitchen filled with dirty dishes and 200 strangers judging my canapes. The phone buzzed again, a text message, then another, then a third. "Mom, don't forget the linen napkins, the heavy ones, not the paper blends, Mom. Also, the mayor might stop by. Make sure we have a good scotch. Mom, no plastic, anywhere. I don't care if it's easier to clean up. It looks low class." I read the words, and they felt like stones being piled onto my chest. "Don't look cheap. Don't embarrass us." They didn't ask how I was. They didn't ask if I could afford to feed 200 people on a single income. They didn't ask if I wanted to spend my holiday serving drinks to people who couldn't remember my name. They just assumed. They assumed I was the infrastructure, the invisible support beam that held up the heavy, gilded roof of their ego. I looked up into the rearview mirror. My eyes looked tired, dark circles etched deep under the harsh parking lot lights. And then, my gaze shifted slightly, past my reflection, to the back seat, and through the gap to the trunk space. My suitcase was there. It was a medium-sized hardshell roller, sleek and black. I had packed it 2 days ago for a potential compliance audit trip to Harrisburg that had been canceled at the last minute this afternoon. It was full of clothes, toiletries, a book I had been meaning to read for 6 months. It was packed for a life where I was a professional, where I stayed in hotels with crisp sheets and ordered room service. I stared at the edge of that suitcase. For 33 years, I had been the dutiful daughter, the one who stayed, the one who fixed it, the one who made it perfect. But what if perfect meant something else? What if perfect meant silence? A strange sensation washed over me. It wasn't the panic from before. It was colder, sharper. It felt like the snap of a rubber band that had been stretched too far, for too long, and finally broke. It wasn't a loud explosion. It was a quiet severance. I looked at my phone again. The screen was glowing with a new text from my father. "Send us the menu draft by tomorrow morning so we can print the cards." I opened the Notes app on my phone. My thumb hovered over the New Note button. Usually, this was where I would start listing ingredients: 5 pounds of shrimp, 3 cases of wine, 4 tenderloins. Instead, I typed a single line: "I am vanishing." I stared at the words. They looked terrifying. They looked beautiful. I closed the app, put the car in reverse, and backed out of the parking spot. I didn't turn right toward the grocery store. I turned left, toward the highway on-ramp. The heater was finally warm, but the fire starting in my chest was hotter. I wasn't going to the grocery store. I wasn't going to buy napkins. For the first time in my life, the Whitfield family event was going to have a gaping hole where the labor used to be. And as I merged onto the dark highway, watching the city lights of Hollow Creek fade in my rearview mirror, I realized I wasn't just driving away from a party. I was driving away from a lifetime of being their unpaid employee. The highway stretched out before me like a dark ribbon, cutting through the Pennsylvania night. With every mile I put between myself and Hollow Creek, the adrenaline of my escape began to fade, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache in my chest. It was the ache of memory, the kind that flares up when you finally stop moving long enough to feel your bruises. I pulled into a 24-hour diner about 40 miles out of town. Not because I was hungry, but because I needed to look at something other than the yellow lane markers. I ordered a black coffee, opened my laptop on the sticky laminate table, and stared at my banking history. It was not a pretty picture. People always ask me why I did it. Why did a grown woman with a degree and a career let her parents treat her like a servant? The answer was never simple. It was a slow creep, a gradual erosion of boundaries that started the year my grandmother died. Before Grandma passed, New Year's Eve was chaotic and warm. We ate on paper plates. The house smelled like pot roast and cheap beer. But when she was gone, my mother, Denise, decided that the family needed to elevate. She declared that we needed a new tradition, something that honored the family name. Honoring the name turned out to be a very expensive hobby. I scrolled back through my bank statements in December of 5 years ago. That was the first year of the perfect initiative. I remembered standing in the middle of a high-end floral shop with my mother. She had picked out 300 white roses and imported eucalyptus. When the cashier rang it up, the total came to $800. My mother had patted her purse, frowned, and given me that look, the one that was half helpless, half expectant. "Oh, Elara, I must have left my card in the other bag. Can you get this? I will transfer it to you when we get home." I paid $800. She never transferred it. When I asked her a week later, she waved a hand and said, "Oh, honey, don't worry. I'll pick up the tab for your birthday dinner." My birthday dinner turned out to be a homemade lasagna. That was the precedent. I clicked on the statement from 3 years ago. There it was. A charge for $1,200 at the butcher's block. I closed my eyes and I was back there. I could smell the raw meat and the sawdust. My father, Gordon, had insisted on prime rib for 50 people. "Top shelf, Elara," he had said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "We want them to cut it with a fork. It reflects on us." I had stood at the counter, watching the butcher wrap the massive cuts of meat in white paper. My credit card felt heavy in my hand. Behind me, a line of people were buying modest hams and turkeys, chatting about their families. I felt a flush of shame, not because I was spending money, but because I knew I was buying a performance. I was paying over $1,000 so my father could stand at the head of the table and carve the meat while his friends whispered about how well the Whitfields were doing. And that was the knife twist, the credit. 2 years ago, I spent $600 on a case of vintage wine because my mother said the domestic brand I bought was vinegar for peasants. During the party, I was in the kitchen, scrubbing a roasting pan because the hired help had canceled, and I heard the mayor's wife in the dining room. "Denise, this wine is exquisite," she had said. "You have such impeccable taste." I waited. I paused my scrubbing, holding my breath, waiting for my mother to say, "Elara picked it out," or even, "Elara treated us." Instead, my mother laughed, a tinkling, practice sound. "Thank you, darling. Gordon and I just couldn't bring ourselves to serve anything less. We wanted you all to feel special." I looked down at my hands in the soapy water. They were red and chapped. I was in the engine room, unseen and greasy, while they stood on the deck waving to the crowd. I took a sip of the bitter diner coffee and looked at the graph on my screen. Every December, there was a massive spike in my spending. It looked like a heart attack on paper. My savings account, which should have been growing for a down payment on a house or a wedding or just a safety net, was being systematically drained to fund one night of glory for 2 people who didn't even know my salary. I wasn't being generous. I realize that now. Generosity is a gift given freely. This was extortion wrapped in a guilt trip. I was buying my place in the family. I was paying a membership fee to be considered a good daughter. I remembered the one time I tried to stop it. Last year, in November. I sat them down. I brought a spreadsheet. I was calm. "Mom, Dad," I had said, "I can't fund the party this year. My rent went up, and I have student loans. If we want to do it, we need to split the costs, or ask the guests to contribute." The silence that followed was absolute. My father looked at me as if I had suggested we serve the guests dog food. "Contribute," he spluttered. "Elara, we are hosts. We do not ask guests to pay. That is tacky." "Then we need to scale back," I countered. "Scale back." My mother looked accurate to tears. "And let everyone think we are struggling. Is that what you want, to humiliate us?" "It's not about humiliation. It's about math." I tried to explain. "Stop it," my father snapped, his voice hard. "We are a family. The family does not count pennies with each other. You do what you can. We do what we can. Don't be so transactional. Elara, it's unbecoming." Transactional. That was the word that shut me up. I didn't want to be transactional. I wanted to be loved. So I put the credit card down again. I ate noodles for 2 months so they could have their fresh seafood tower. But looking at the numbers now, under the harsh fluorescent lights of the diner, I saw the truth. They were the transactional ones. They traded my solvency for their social status. They traded my labor for their leisure. I was done buying stocks in a company that paid me 0 dividends. I opened a new folder on my desktop. My fingers hovered over the keys. I didn't name it budget or party planning. I typed NYE or receipts. I began to download every statement, every invoice from the rental company that was in my name, every grocery receipt I had scanned, the emails where they sent me lists of demands, but never asked for a Venmo link, the text messages where my mother critiqued the thread count of the napkins I bought. I was not just leaving, I was building a case. If they wanted a perfect New Year's Eve, they could have it. But this year, the cost wouldn't be hidden in my bank account. The bill was coming due, and for the first time in history, the Whitfields were going to have to look at the price tag. I closed the laptop with a definitive click. The waitress came by with a fresh pot of coffee. "Refill, hun?" she asked. "No, thank you," I said, standing up and throwing a $5 bill on the table. "I have to get moving. I have a lot of work to do." I walked back out to my car. The wind was still cold, but I didn't feel it as much anymore. I had a plan, and for the first time, the plan wasn't about making sure everyone else was happy. It was about making sure the truth was receipts verified and ready for audit. I did not drive home immediately. Instead, I pulled into the empty lot behind an abandoned Blockbuster Video, a relic of a past era that felt strangely appropriate for what I was about to do. I needed a war room, and the front seat of my sedan, bathed in the flickering orange light of a street lamp, would have to suffice. I dialed Kara Monroe. Kara was my former colleague at Northgate, and the only person who knew the full, unredacted history of the Whitfield family dynamics. She picked up on the second ring, her voice raspy with sleep, but instantly alert. "It is 10:30 at night, Elara," she said. "You are either in jail, or your mother has announced a new theme for the holidays." "The theme is perfect," I said, my voice sounding terrifyingly calm to my own ears. "And the guest list is 200. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Kara shifting in her bed, the rustle of sheets, then a sharp exhale. 200, she repeated flatly. "And let me guess, you are the caterer, the planner, the financier, and the janitor." "Correct," I said. "They want it to be like a magazine spread. They called me tonight, no budget offered, no help offered, just a deadline." "Okay," Kara said. She didn't sound angry. She sounded like a lawyer preparing a closing argument. "Here's the question. Elara, the only question that matters." I could not just leave. I had to remove the illusion that the Whitfield household functioned by magic. I started a new document, Operation Zero. First, the pantry. My parents believed their pantry was naturally stocked with gourmet ingredients. They thought truffle oil and saffron threads just appeared, like dust bunnies. I made a list of what I had bought over the last 2 months in preparation for the holiday season: the imported olive oil, the 3 pounds of pecans, the expensive crackers, the case of San Pellegrino. It was all going into my trunk. Second, the decor. Every year. My mother bragged about her curated collection of table settings. I knew for a fact that the silver chargers, the linen runners, and the heavy crystal votives were currently sitting in plastic bins in the garage bins I had purchased, organized, and labeled. They were coming with me. Third, and this was the one that made me let out a short, dry laugh: the cleaning service. My parents lived in a 4-bedroom house that was perpetually spotless. They attributed this to their own clean living. The reality was that I paid a service called the Maids of Hollow Creek $300 a month to come in twice a week while my parents were at the country club. My parents had never seen a bill. They just assumed the house cleaned itself. I pulled up the cleaning services app on my phone. My thumb hovered over the Cancel Recurring Appointment button. The next clean was scheduled for tomorrow morning, the deep clean before the party. I tapped the screen. Appointment canceled. "Enjoy scrubbing the toilets, Dad," I whispered to the empty car. It was petty. It was magnificent. Next, I needed a destination. It had to be far enough that they could not just drive over and bang on my door, but close enough that I could get there tonight before I lost my nerve. I pulled up a rental site. I needed isolation. I needed no signal, or at least a place where bad reception was a believable excuse. I found a cabin in Lake Briar. It was a small A-frame tucked into the woods, 3 hours north. It was listed as rustic and secluded. Perfect. I booked it for 5 nights. The total came to $600, half of what I would have spent on the prime rib alone. Now for the digital fortress. I logged into my bank's mobile app. I went to the security settings and turned on transaction alerts for anything over $1. Then, I went to every shared account, the Amazon Prime family account, the Instacart login my mother used in emergencies, and I removed my credit card. It was while I was scrubbing my digital footprint that I found the smoking gun. I logged into my email to find the confirmation for the party rentals. My father had mentioned they needed extra tables and those nice Chiavari chairs. I assumed he had called Briarstone Event Rentals himself, as he knew the owner. But there, in my inbox, was an automated confirmation from yesterday. Subject order confirmation 4492. Whitfield. E-Bash. Bill. To Alara. Whitfield card. On file visa. Ending in 4092. I froze. I hadn't booked this. I clicked on the details. The order had been placed online using my stored profile. My mother must have logged in, or called them and told them to put it on Alara's account like usual. The deposit was $500. The total due on delivery was $2,000. I wasn't just the planner. I was the non-consensual financier. If I hadn't looked, that $2,000 would have been auto-drafted on the 31st. My blood ran cold, then hot. This wasn't just an assumption of labor anymore. It was theft. They were spending my money before I had even agreed to the party. I called the rental company's after-hours line. It went to voicemail. I didn't care. I navigated to the Manage Order page on their website. Cancel order. A warning popped up: cancellations within 72 hours. Forfeit the deposit. I didn't care about the $500. It was a small price to pay to save $2,000. I clicked confirm. The screen flashed green: order canceled. I took a screenshot. This was going into the NYE receipts folder. I called Kara back. "I just canceled the tables," I said. "And the chairs, and the cleaning lady." "Oh, I love this song," Kara said. "Keep going." I found out they booked the rentals on my card without asking me. $2,000. Kara. "That is fraud." "Alara," Kara said, her voice losing its humor. "That is actual identity theft." "I know," I said. "I am going to Lake Briar. I am leaving tonight." "Good. Turn off your location sharing," Kara advised. "And Alara, don't write them a long letter. Don't explain why you are hurt. Don't tell them about your feelings. They don't care about your feelings. They care about the service you provide." "So what do I say?" I asked. "Nothing," Kara said. "Let the empty pantry and the dirty floors do the talking. The silence will be louder than anything you can write." She was right. Explanations were for people who wanted to be understood. I didn't need them to understand me. I needed them to feel the weight of my absence. I hung up. I opened my messaging app and created a new group chat with just my mother and father. I typed out a message. Dear Mom and Dad, I hope the preparations are going well. I will not be attending the party this year. I have canceled the unauthorized rental order placed on my card. I have also suspended the cleaning service and removed my personal items from the pantry. I am taking a much-needed vacation. Do not look for me. I read it over. It was too long, too emotional. Kara was right. I deleted it. I typed a new version. To the family, I am unavailable for the holiday. I have removed my financial and logistical support effective immediately. The rental contract in my name has been canceled. Good luck with the party. Better. Clinical. Professional. I didn't hit send. Not yet. I looked at the clock. It was 11:15. If I left now, I would be at their house by midnight. I could strip the place and be on the road to Lake Briar by 1 in the morning. I set the message to schedule send. Date December 31st. Time 6:00 p.m. That was 30 minutes before the guests were set to arrive. It was cruel. It was calculated. It was the perfect surprise. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and started the engine. The engine purred, a sound of readiness. I wasn't just driving a car anymore. I was piloting a getaway vehicle from a crime scene where I had been both the victim and the cleaner. I pulled out of the lot, the gravel crunching satisfyingly under my tires. I had work to do, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't working for them. I was working for myself. Briarstone Estates was dead silent at 4:30 in the morning. It was a silence that felt expensive, the kind of hushed stillness you only get in neighborhoods where the houses are set far back from the street, and the landscaping absorbs all the noise of the real world. I killed the headlights of my car before I turned into the driveway, letting the vehicle coast to a stop near the garage. I felt like a thief, which was ironic. Considering I was about to reclaim property that legally belonged to me, I gripped the spare key in my hand. It was cold against my palm. I had used this key 1,000 times to let in caterers, to accept deliveries, to water plants, to come over and fix the Wi-Fi. It had always been the tool of my servitude. Today, it was the tool of my liberation. I slid the key into the lock of the back door. It turned with a smooth, well-oiled click. I held my breath, listening. Nothing. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the foyer. My parents were heavy sleepers, confident in their safety, confident that the world and their daughter would keep spinning correctly while they rested. I stepped inside and didn't take off my shoes. That was the first small rebellion. The kitchen was pristine. The marble countertops gleamed in the faint blue light of the microwave clock. It was a beautiful stage, set for a performance that was no longer going to happen. I pulled 2 large, heavy-duty duffel bags from under my coat. I started with the pantry. I opened the door, and the automatic light flickered on. I winced, waiting for a shout from upstairs. But the house remained silent. I looked at the shelves. They were stocked with the inventory of my own bank account. I began to grab items, moving with a frantic, quiet efficiency. The truffle oil I had bought last week for $40 into the bag. The 3 jars of imported saffron threads. Into the bag, the artisanal crackers, the fig jam, the aged balsamic vinegar, the 10 pounds of high-grade pecans for the pies. All of it went into the bag. Each item I touched triggered a memory of a transaction. I remembered buying that vanilla extract, standing in the aisle of Whole Foods while my mother texted me to make sure it was the Madagascar kind, not the chemical stuff. I remembered the heaviness of the bag as I carried it to my car, worrying about my credit limit. I wasn't stealing food. I was repossessing my labor. I was taking back the perfect they thought just appeared by magic. I cleared 2 shelves. The pantry looked suddenly skeletal. Gaps appeared like missing teeth. I moved to the linen closet in the hallway. This was where the illusion truly lived. I opened the cedar-lined drawers and pulled out the stacks of napkins. These weren't just napkins. They were Belgian linen. $70 for a set of 4. And I had bought 40 of them over the last 3 years because my mother said paper napkins were trashy. I took the silver napkin rings. I took the hand-dipped beeswax candles from the sideboard drawer. I took the crystal place card holders I had ordered from a boutique in New York. As I shoved the heavy linens into the second bag, I heard a noise. The refrigerator cycled off, and the silence that rushed back in was deafening. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. I waited. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Silence returned. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding and zipped up the bags. They were heavy, filled with the physical weight of my contributions. I pulled out my phone. The screen was bright in the dark kitchen. I opened the app for the cleaning service. I had canceled the recurring appointment last night, but seeing the confirmation on the screen while standing in the house made it real. Service status inactive. I looked at the pristine floors. My mother loved to tell her friends how she kept the house spotless. "I just tidy up daily," she would say. She didn't. 2 women named Maria and Elena came here twice a week and scrubbed the baseboards on their hands and knees, and I paid the invoice on the 1st of every month, tomorrow. When the 200 guests tracked mud and snow into the foyer, there would be no Maria and Elena coming the next morning to erase the evidence. The dirt would stay. The mess would be theirs. I walked over to the kitchen island. This was the command center. This was where I usually left the printed menus and the run of show for the evening. I took a piece of plain notebook paper from my pocket. I hadn't used the heavy cardstock stationery my mother liked. I used cheap, lined paper. I uncapped a black marker. "Mom and Dad, I am going away for the holiday. I will not be cooking. I will not be cleaning. I will not be serving. Elara." I didn't write, "I'm sorry." I didn't write, "I love you." I didn't write a reason. I looked at the note. It was brutal in its simplicity. It was a resignation letter scrawled on a scrap of paper. I placed the note in the center of the marble island, right where my father usually put his coffee mug in the morning. Then, I did the final thing. I took the spare key out of my pocket. The metal was warm now from my body heat. I placed it on top of the note. It made a sharp clack against the stone. That sound was the period at the end of a very long sentence. I picked up the heavy bags, the straps digging into my shoulders. I walked to the back door, careful not to let the bags bang against the cabinets. I opened the door, stepped out into the biting cold air, and pulled it shut behind me. I didn't lock it. I couldn't. The key was inside. The click of the latch engaging was final. I was locked out. For the first time in my life, I was on the outside of the Whitfield house, and I had no way to get back in. I walked to my car, the gravel crunching loudly now that I didn't care about being heard. I threw the bags into the trunk next to my suitcase. The suspension of the car dipped slightly under the weight of the reclaimed groceries and linens. I got into the driver's seat and started the engine. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the perfectly manicured hedges that lined the driveway. As I shifted into reverse, my phone began to buzz in the cup holder. I glanced down. It was 5:15 in the morning. The screen lit up with a photo of my mother, Mom calling. She must have woken up. Maybe she heard the car. Maybe she sensed a disturbance in the force field of her comfort. The phone vibrated against the plastic. A jagged, angry sound. I didn't reach for it. I didn't feel the familiar spike of panic. I just felt a strange, detached curiosity. Let it ring. I backed out of the driveway, swung the car around, and drove toward the exit of the estate. The phone stopped ringing, then started again immediately. I reached over and flipped the phone face down. I didn't look back at the house. I accelerated onto the main road, the tires humming on the asphalt, putting distance between me and the perfect New Year's Eve. I was driving toward a cabin in the woods, toward silence, toward a world where I was a person, not an appliance, and for the first time in years, the road ahead looked wide open. The cabin in Lake Briar was silent, a stark contrast to the digital hurricane raging inside my pocket. I had thrown my phone onto the rustic pine table the moment I walked in, treating it like a radioactive isotope, but silence, I learned quickly, has a way of amplifying noise. The phone didn't just vibrate, it danced across the wood, a relentless, angry buzz that echoed off the high beams of the A-frame ceiling. I sat by the cold fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, watching the screen light up. It started with a text from my mother at 10 in the morning. Mom, where are you? The Millers just texted. They are landing early. They will be here by noon. I didn't answer. I sipped my tea and watched a cardinal land on the snow-covered railing outside. Mom, 10:15 a.m. Alara, pick up. This isn't funny. I need you to go to the store. The pantry is empty. Did you take the crackers? Mom, 10:45 a.m. Stop acting like a child. You are embarrassing me. Get here now. Then came the calls. My father. Gordon Whitfield didn't call to chat. He called to command. I let it go to voicemail. Then he called again, and again. I watched his name flash on the screen, Dad, and for the first time in 33 years, I didn't feel the impulse to jump. I felt a strange, morbid curiosity. Finally, I picked up the phone, not to answer, but to check the family group chat. It was titled, Whitfield NYE Extravaganza, a name my mother had chosen with great pride 3 weeks ago. Now, it looked less like a party planning thread and more like a distress signal from a sinking ship. Cousin Greg, hey, we are at the gate. What's the code? Usually Alara texts it to us. Aunt Linda. Is there going to be a gluten-free option for the kids? I didn't bring snacks because Denise said it was all taken care of. Uncle Bob. Where do we park? The driveway is full of catering trucks. Oh wait, no. That's just a delivery guy turning around. Is the caterer here yet? I scrolled, reading the panic in real time. Nobody knew anything. They were asking questions that I had answered silently for a decade. What is the gate code? Where are the appetizers? Who is watching the coats? A new message popped up from my father in the main chat, typed in all caps, which meant he was typing with one angry finger. Everyone please be patient. Alara is running a bit late. Come on in. I let out a dry laugh. Running late. He still thought I was coming. He thought this was a traffic jam, not a resignation. Then, a direct message came through from Miles. Miles was my cousin, the only one in the family who saw the cracks in the foundation. He was cynical, observant, and currently my eyes and ears on the ground. Miles, Alara. You need to see this. It is like a nature documentary where the predators realize the prey has vanished. Alara. Tell me. Miles, the Montgomerys arrived. Early? Of course. Aunt Denise tried to offer them a drink, but she couldn't find the crystal glasses. I think she's currently serving tap water in those emergency mugs you keep in the back of the cabinet. The ones with the chipped rims, Alara. The crystal is in the attic. I bring it down every year on the 29th. Miles. Well, it's still in the attic, and Uncle Gordon is standing in the foyer looking like he's trying to hold up the roof with his smile. It's straining. Alara. The smile is straining. I closed my eyes and pictured it. The grand foyer of the Whitfield estate, usually smelling of fresh lilies and expensive candles, now probably smelled like faint desperation and wet coats. Miles update. Denise just went to the pantry. She was looking for the good crackers and the fig jam. She came out empty-handed. She looks like she's about to hyperventilate. She just whispered to your dad. There is nothing. It is all gone. I felt a pang of phantom guilt, sharp and quick, but I shoved it down. It wasn't gone. It was just repossessed. Miles. The house feels naked, no centerpieces, no table runners, just bare wood and panic. A bunch of people are standing around the kitchen island waiting for food that doesn't exist. It's awkward. Alara, it is physically painful to watch. I could see my father, Gordon, the man who prided himself on being the ultimate host. He would be pacing. He would be trying to distract them with loud stories about his golf game, hoping they wouldn't notice that there was no shrimp cocktail, no cheese board, no perfect atmosphere. Back in the group chat, the confusion was turning into irritation. Aunt Linda is dinner seated or buffet. The kids are starving. Second cousin Mike. Yeah, we skipped lunch because Gordon said the spread would be huge. My phone buzzed with another voicemail from my father. I decided to listen to this one. Alara. His voice was tight, the audio quality poor as if he was whispering in a closet. I don't know what kind of sick game you are playing, but get home, now. People are asking questions. The Millers are looking at the empty table. You have duties. Alara, you can't just leave us like this. We have 200 people coming. Fix this. Fix this. Not, are you okay? Not, we are worried. Just fix the machine you broke. I looked at the time. It was 4 p.m. The main wave of guests, the VIPs, the partners, the people my parents wanted to impress would be arriving in 2 hours. Miles. Okay. This is getting bad. Someone just asked for a napkin and Denise handed them a paper towel from the roll. A paper towel. Alara. The horror. Miles. Wait. Aunt Sarah just said something loud. You know Aunt Sarah? The one with no filter, Alara? What did she say, Miles? She looked around the bare living room, looked at the empty buffet table, and said, Funny. Usually this place looks like a magazine by now. Who usually does all the decorating? Did you fire the planner? The question hung in the digital air. Who usually does all this? Miles' silence. Dead silence. Denise turned red. Gordon coughed. Nobody answered her. They literally don't know how to say, our daughter does it and we take the credit. The sun was setting outside my cabin, casting long blue shadows across the snow. In Hollow Creek, the lights would be coming on. My mother would be realizing that she hadn't bought candles. She would be realizing that the mood lighting she loved was actually me running around dimming switches and lighting wicks for an hour. The chaos I had orchestrated was not violent. There was no screaming, no fighting. It was just a vacuum, a massive, sucking void where my labor used to be, and that void was sucking the air out of the room. Miles. Oh, wow. Okay. The vibe just shifted. Someone just walked in. Alara who? Miles. I don't know her well. She's with that cousin from the city. Sharp suit. Looks like she audits people for fun. She just walked in, took one look at the chaos, looked at the empty tables, and walked straight up to your dad. My heart skipped a beat. I knew who he was talking about. Serena Holt, my second cousin's wife. She was a forensic accountant. She didn't do small talk. She did numbers. Miles. She didn't say hello. She didn't wish him a happy new year. She just stood there for 2 seconds, letting the silence stretch out. I held my breath, clutching the phone. Miles. She looked Gordon dead in the eye and said, loud enough for half the room to hear, Gordon, this looks like a foreclosure, not a party. Let me ask you a straight question. Who is the person that actually pays for perfect? I stared at the text. The question I had been asking myself for 5 years had finally been asked out loud, in front of everyone. My father's response didn't come through in the text, but I didn't need to read it. I knew what it was. It was the sound of a man realizing that his credit, social, and financial had just been declined. My phone, lying on the rough pine table of the cabin, was no longer just a communication device. It had become a wiretap. Miles had stopped texting. Instead, he had done something risky and brilliant. He had called me, put his phone in the front pocket of his blazer with the microphone facing out, and left the line open. Through the speaker, the chaotic din of my parents' living room filled the small cabin. I could hear the murmur of 200 confused guests, the clinking of cheap glass, likely the backup tumblers we kept for water, and the distinct, high-pitched frequency of my mother's rising panic. But then, a new sound cut through the noise. It was the sharp, rhythmic clack, clack, clack of heels on the hardwood floor. It was a sound I knew. It was the sound of authority arriving. Excuse me, a voice said. It wasn't loud, but it had the projection of a courtroom gavel. The ambient chatter in the room died down almost instantly. It was Serena Holt. I closed my eyes, leaning back in my chair, visualizing the scene. Serena was my second cousin's wife, a woman who worked in forensic accounting for a massive firm in Philadelphia. She didn't care about social pleasantries. She cared about ledgers. She cared about the truth of numbers. Gordon, Serena's voice came through clearly. Denise, we need to stop pretending the caterer is stuck in traffic. Now, Serena, my father's voice boomed. Though it lacked its usual jovial weight, it sounded hollow, like a drum with a hole in it. We are just hitting a few logistical snags. Alara usually... Elara isn't here, Serena interrupted. Her tone was flat. And because she isn't here, there is no food, there are no tables, there are no linens, there is no bar. I heard a rustle, like someone shifting in a crowd. The audience, my relatives, were listening. So, Serena continued, I want to ask a very simple question, a question that everyone in this room is currently whispering to each other, but is too polite to say to your face. Where is the party? Gordon. We are handling it, my mother snapped. Elara is having a moment. She is being dramatic. She decided to punish us by dropping the ball at the last minute because of some perceived slight. A perceived slight, Serena repeated. Denise, abandoning a 200-person event isn't a tantrum. It is a strike. People only go on strike when they aren't being paid or treated fairly. We are family, my father shouted, his temper fraying. We don't talk about payment. We all contribute. That is how this family works. Contribute. Serena tested the word, tasting it like spoiled milk. That is an interesting word. Let's unpack that. When you say, everyone contributes, do you mean everyone writes a check? Or do you mean everyone just shows up and drinks the wine? The silence that followed was heavy. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the background. We all pitch in, my father stammered. I pay for the big things. Elara handles the details. The details, Serena said. Okay, let's talk about last year. The Wagyu beef sliders. Who paid for those? I did, my father said immediately. I told Elara to get them from the butcher. You told her to get them, Serena corrected. Did you give her a credit card, or did she use hers? I probably gave her cash later. I don't recall the specifics. It is petty to bring this up now. Serena. Is it? Serena's voice dropped an octave. It was the voice she probably used when she found a hidden offshore account during an audit. Hey, Bob. Uncle Bob. I heard my Uncle Bob grunt in surprise. Yeah. Last year, Serena said. You raved about the scotch, the 18-year-old single malt. Who did you thank for it? I thanked Gordon, Bob said, sounding confused. He poured it. Gordon poured it, Serena repeated. Miles, are you there? My heart was hammered. Miles was about to speak into the very phone I was listening on. I'm here, Miles said. His voice was close to the microphone, loud and clear. You went on the supply run with Elara 2 years ago, Serena said. I remember you mentioning it. Who paid at the register? Elara did, Miles said. He didn't hesitate. The bill was $1,400. She used her personal visa. I remember because her card declined the first time and she had to call her bank to authorize a large purchase. She was crying in the car afterwards because she was worried she wouldn't make rent. A collective gasp went through the room. It wasn't a movie gasp. It was the sound of air being sucked out of 200 lungs. She never told us that, my mother whispered. She never said she couldn't afford it. Did you ever ask? Serena fired back. Or did you just hand her a list? She likes doing it, my mother cried out, her voice cracking. It makes her feel useful. She wants the family to look good. She wants you to love her, Serena said brutally. There is a difference. I wiped a tear from my cheek. It was hot and angry. Gordon, Serena said, show me the rental confirmation for today. You said the truck was late. Show me the email. I don't have to show you anything, my father blustered. This is my house. And these are my hungry children, Serena countered. Show me the email, or I'm calling the police to report a scam, because promising a party and taking contributions from family members, I saw that cash box. Gordon without delivering goods is technically fraud. There were scuffle sounds, a pause, then the sound of paper being smoothed out, or maybe a phone being passed. Here, my father said, defeated. This is what she sent me yesterday, the confirmation. Silence stretched for 10 seconds. I imagined Serena reading the email on my father's phone, the one I had forwarded to him days ago before I canceled it. Look at the bill toe field. Gordon, Serena said. Her voice was quiet now. Dangerous. Read the name out loud, My father didn't speak. "Read it," Serena commanded. "Elara Whitfield," my father mumbled. "And the credit card. Visa, ending in 4092. Is that your card, Gordon?" "No," he whispered. "Is it yours, Denise?" "No." "So," Serena said, and I could hear her turning to face the room. I could picture her pivoting on her heel, addressing the jury of aunts, uncles, and cousins who were standing in their coats, holding empty plates. Elara didn't just plan the party. She didn't just coordinate the logistics. She financed the illusion. She paused to let the verdict sink in. "She didn't run away because she is a brat," Serena said. "She ran away because her credit limit ran out." "We would have paid her back," my father shouted, desperate to salvage the shred of dignity he had left. "If she had asked, we would have written a check." "You have had 10 years to write a check, Gordon," Serena said. "You never did." I heard footsteps. Serena was walking closer to where my father must have been standing. "You know what this looks like to me?" Serena asked. "It looks like you invited 200 people to a gala, accepted their praise, accepted their envy, and accepted their cash contributions. But you expected your daughter to foot the bill. It's not like that," my father pleaded. "It is exactly like that," Serena said. Then came the silence, the kind of silence that marks the end of an era. The perfect New Year's Eve was dead. The corpse was lying on the living room floor. Serena delivered the final blow, her voice crystal clear through the speaker in Miles's pocket. "You didn't invite us, Gordon," she said. "You invited us with your daughter's wallet, and since the wallet has left the building, I suggest you tell everyone the truth, or I will." The silence in the cabin was heavy, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the tinny, distorted audio streaming from the phone on the table. I was glued to the speaker, my breath hitching in my throat. I had thought the humiliation of my father was the peak. The moment the fever broke, I was wrong. The infection went deeper. Through the speaker, I heard the distinct sound of a drawer being yanked open, the junk drawer in the hallway console, the one my mother usually guarded like a state secret. "What is this?" Serena's voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd. "Put that back," my mother, Denise, snapped. Her voice was shrill, losing the polished veneer of the hostess and revealing the cornered desperation underneath. "That is a private family business. It says NYE contribution in Sharpie on the lid," Serena read out loud. "And it is full of envelopes." I sat up straighter in my chair. "Contribution." "Well, yes," a voice I recognized as Aunt Linda chimed in. She sounded confused, her tone bordering on defensive. "We all sent our envelopes. Denise sends out the text every November, $50 to $100 per family, depending on how many kids we bring, to help Elara with the costs." My blood ran cold. The room started to spin. "To help Elara?" Serena asked, her voice deadly calm. "Yes," Aunt Linda continued. "Denise said Elara was struggling a bit with the inflation this year, so we all pitched in. I sent $200 via Venmo to your dad because I didn't have cash. We all did." I felt a physical blow to my chest. I scrambled for my laptop, my fingers trembling as I logged into my bank account again. I searched my transaction history for Dad. "Mom." Venmo. Zelle. Nothing. $0, 0 cents. For 5 years. I had drained my savings, maxed out my credit cards, and eaten ramen noodles in January to pay for this party. And for 5 years, my parents had been collecting donations in my name. "Elara," Miles whispered into the phone, his voice barely audible over the commotion. "Did you hear that?" "I heard it," I whispered back, tears of pure rage hot in my eyes. "I never saw a dime. Miles. Not a single penny." On the other end of the line, Serena was doing the math. "Okay," Serena said. "Let's do a quick audit. There are roughly 40 families here. If the average contribution is, let's be conservative, $75. That is $3,000. Where is that money?" "Denise." I used it for the party." my mother stammered. For the house. The house is part of the party experience. The house? Serena repeated. You mean the new quartz countertops in the kitchen, the ones you got installed last month? The guests need a nice place to stand, my mother cried. It counts. It all goes into the pot. So, Serena said, her voice dripping with disdain, you took money from your sister, your brother-in-law, your nieces and nephews, ostensibly to help your daughter buy food, and you used it to renovate your kitchen. It's family money, my father roared, trying to regain control. It stays in the family. Ilara is family, Aunt Linda shouted, finally losing her temper. And she isn't here, and there is no food, so clearly, the money didn't go to her. The room erupted. The polite veneer of the Whitfield clan shattered. People were shouting, demanding refunds, asking where their $200 went if they were currently staring at an empty buffet table, but Serena wasn't done. Wait, she commanded. The authority in her voice silenced the room again. What is this? I heard the sound of paper being ripped open. I found this in the pile of mail on the counter, Serena said. It is a letter from a home goods store. Welcome to your new Platinum Rewards card. Don't read my mail, my mother shrieked. It isn't addressed to you, Denise, Serena said. It is addressed to Ilara Whitfield. My heart stopped. I didn't have a Platinum Rewards card from that store. I hadn't applied for any new credit in 2 years because my debt-to-income ratio was already ruined by these parties. I didn't open that, I whispered to the empty cabin. The card is activated, Serena said, her voice turning icy. And there is a receipt here stapled to the welcome letter, a charge from yesterday. $400 for holiday decor and sofa throw pillows. Signed, well, that doesn't look like Ilara's signature. That looks like your handwriting. Denise? The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a crime scene. You opened a credit card in your daughter's name, Serena asked, to buy pillows. She has good credit. My mother sobbed, breaking down completely. We needed the house to look perfect. She wouldn't mind. She always pays the bills anyway. We were going to pay it off. Eventually, I didn't listen to the rest of her excuse. I moved with the speed of survival. I opened 3 tabs on my browser: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. My hands were shaking, but my typing was steady. I logged into each bureau. There it was, a hard inquiry from yesterday. A new account opened. I clicked Freeze Credit. Are you sure the screen asked? Yes. I clicked it again, and again. Then I logged into the Store Cards portal using my social security number to find the account. I found the Dispute Charge button. I selected Fraud/Identity Theft. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a victim of financial abuse protecting her future. I wasn't going to let them ruin my credit score for a set of throw pillows. She is doing it right now, Miles whispered into the phone. I can see the look on her face. She knows she is caught. Serena's voice came back. Lower now, more dangerous. You committed identity theft against your own child, she said to my parents. To impress people who, frankly, don't even like you that much. We just wanted it to be perfect, my father whispered. We just wanted everyone to think we were successful. You aren't successful, Serena said. You are thieves. The atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't just awkward anymore. It was hostile. The guests, the cousins, the aunts, the business partners weren't looking at the empty table with disappointment. They were looking at Gordon and Denise with disgust. The narrative had flipped. I wasn't the selfish daughter who ruined New Year's Eve. I was the bankroll they had bled dry. Here is the situation, Serena announced to the room. The party, as Gordon and Denise envisioned it, is over. The perfect night was canceled because it was funded by fraud. I heard the rustle of coats. People were preparing to leave. However, Serena continued, we are all here. We are all hungry. And I, for one, refuse to let these 2 people ruin my holiday. She paused. So, here's the deal. Tonight, we pivot. Either you all go home and eat leftovers, or we organize this ourselves. But we do not use Ilara's money. We do not use Ilara's name. And we stop calling it Perfect. We call it what it is, a cleanup operation. She turned to my parents. And you two, she said, you are going to sit on that new sofa you bought with stolen money, and you are going to be quiet. If I hear one word of complaint, I am driving to the police station to file a report on Alara's behalf. Do I make myself clear? Yes, my father whispered. Good, Serena said. Now, who knows how to order 20 pizzas? I sat back in my chair, the fire warm on my face. My credit was frozen. My secret was out, and for the first time, the perfect facade had cracked wide open, revealing the rot underneath. I took a deep breath. It was the first breath of air I had taken in years that didn't feel like it cost me something. The digital clock on the mantel of the cabin changed from 5:59 to 6 o'clock. It was a small change, just a shifting of pixels. But in Hollow Creek, it was the detonation of a bomb I had planted 24 hours ago. I sat perfectly still, my hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm tea, staring at the phone I had left on speaker mode. I didn't have to wait long. Through Miles's open line, I heard the first ping. It was a sharp, cheerful chime that cut through the tense murmuring of the living room, then another, then 3 more in rapid succession. Within 10 seconds, the room sounded like a casino floor where every slot machine had hit the jackpot simultaneously. It was the sound of 40 smartphones receiving the same message at the exact same time. I had set the scheduled message to go to the Whitfield NYE Extravaganza group chat. I hadn't changed the text since I drafted it in the parking lot, but I had added an attachment. It wasn't a sentimental letter. It was a PDF, a single page, color-coded, titled, The Cost of Perfect, a 5-Year Review. I closed my eyes and visualized what they were seeing. Column of food and beverage. Column B, decor and rentals. Column C, cleaning and maintenance. Column D, labor hours. Unpaid. Column E, total personal cost to Alara Whitfield. At the bottom, in bold red font, was the grand total. It was a number that could have been a down payment on a house. It was a number that represented every vacation I didn't take, every student loan payment I deferred, and every time I said, I can't afford to go out, to my friends. And below the number, I had written the sentence that I knew would burn itself into the retina of every family member in that room. If perfect requires one person to pay the bill and vanish into the kitchen, it is not a tradition, it is exploitation. The silence in my parents' living room was different this time. It wasn't the silence of confusion or the silence of shock. It was the silence of shame. It was the sound of people reading a receipt for a meal they had been eating for years without asking who was cooking. My God, I heard Aunt Linda whisper. Her voice was right next to Miles's phone. $30,000 over 5 years. She paid for the tent rental 3 years ago. Uncle Bob's voice was gruff. Gordon told me he got a discount from a buddy. He lied? Serena's voice cut in. She sounded vindicated. Look at the breakdown. Emergency cleaning fee. Rush order on linens. These aren't party costs. These are panic costs. These are the prices of Denise's last-minute demands. I took a deep breath. This was the moment. The bridge was burned. The truth was out. But I wasn't just here to destroy. I was a coordinator. After all, I fixed things. I just wasn't going to fix them the way my parents wanted. My phone buzzed with the second part of my scheduled plan. In the group chat, a new message popped up. Alara. I am not coming to save the party, but I'm not going to leave the family with nowhere to go. Serena has the key. I heard the rustle of movement. What key? My father's voice cracked. He sounded smaller than I had ever heard him. He was no longer the master of ceremonies. He was just a man standing in a hallway full of people who knew he was a fraud. The key to the Hollow Creek Civic Hall, Serena announced. Her voice projected clearly. I called the town council president an hour ago. Since it is New Year's Eve, the hall was sitting empty. I paid the rental fee, out of my own pocket. It was $200. The Civic Hall, my mother gasped. That basement. It smells like floor wax. It has fluorescent lights. We can't take the Millers there. We can? And we will, Serena said firmly, because it has tables, it has chairs, and it has a working kitchen. My text continued on the screens they were holding Alara. There is no caterer. There is no staff. This is a potluck. If you want to eat, order a pizza, run to the grocery store, or go home and grab what's in your fridge. There is a play area for the kids in the corner with the tumbling mats. No dress code, no seating chart, just show up. A potluck, Cousin Greg asked. He didn't sound horrified. He sounded interested. You mean I can take off this tie? You can burn the tie for all I care, Serena said. The rules are simple. We all pitch in, real contributions. We track the costs on a sheet of paper taped to the door. Anyone who puts in money gets reimbursed from the contribution box Denise is holding. Anything left over goes back to the guests. That is fair, Uncle Bob said. That is actually how we used to do it. Before all this? He waved a hand at the marble foyer, the expensive emptiness of the house. I waited for the backlash. I waited for them to say it was tacky, that it was beneath them, that they would rather go to a restaurant. Instead, I heard a sound I didn't expect. I heard a sigh of relief. Thank God. A woman's voice, maybe Cousin Sarah, said, My heels are killing me. I just want to eat a slice of pizza and watch the ball drop. I don't care about the crystal stemware. I have 2 cases of beer in my truck, Mike shouted. I was afraid to bring them in because Gordon said no domestic bottles were allowed. Bring them, Serena commanded. We leave in 10 minutes. Carpool to the Civic Hall. The energy in the room shifted instantly. It went from a stagnant, awkward funeral to a mobilized unit. People were zipping up coats, laughing, coordinating rides. The paralysis of perfect was gone, replaced by the messy, functional reality of good enough. But there were 2 people who weren't moving. Gordon, Denise. Serena's voice was softer now, but still firm. You have a choice. I leaned in closer to the phone. This was it. You can stay here, Serena said, in your perfect house. With your quartz countertops and your empty pantry, you can sit here alone and pretend you are superior, or you can come with us to the community hall, eat pizza on a folding table, and actually be with your family. I can't, my mother whispered. It's humiliating. What will people say? They are already talking. Denise, Serena said. The only thing that changes is whether you are there to hear it and fix it, or if you hide. Gordon, Serena asked. My father was silent for a long time. I imagined him looking at the grand staircase, the chandelier, the symbols of the life he had built on my back. They know, he said hoarsely. They all know. They know you are human, Serena corrected. And they know you are broke. It is actually very liberating. Gordon, you don't have to pretend to be rich anymore. You can just be Uncle Gordon. I heard the jingle of car keys. The front door was opening and closing. The guests were leaving. The herd was moving on. Are you coming? Serena asked one last time. I am locking the door behind me. There was a pause, a heartbeat, 2 heartbeats. Then I heard a small, trembling voice. It was my mother. Serena. Yes, Denise. If we come. My mother hesitated. Her voice sounded stripped raw, devoid of the affectation she had worn for a decade. If we come, what do we bring? We don't have any food. I let out a breath, a long, shuddering exhale that fogged the cold air of the cabin. She asked, for the first time in history, Denise Whitfield didn't bark an order. She asked what her contribution should be. Bring the napkins, Serena said kindly. The paper ones. We are going to need a lot of them. Okay, my mother whispered. Okay. I heard the rustle of the paper towel roll being grabbed. I heard the click of the heavy front door. And then, I heard the silence of the empty house through the phone. They had left. The perfect New Year's Eve was officially abandoned. And as I sat alone in the woods, 3 hours away, I realized I had never felt closer to the truth. They were going to a basement with fluorescent lights, and for the first time, they were going as themselves. The fire in the cabin had burned down to glowing embers, casting long, wavering shadows against the log walls. I sat in the semi-darkness, the mug of tea cold in my hands, my entire existence focused on the speaker of the phone lying on the table. It was my lifeline to a world I had abandoned, a digital window into the Hollow Creek Civic Hall. The audio quality was different now. The hollow, echoing acoustics of the large community center replaced the muffled carpeted silence of my parents' living room. I could hear the scraping of metal chair legs against linoleum floors, the high-pitched squeal of children running on the tumbling mats, and the distinct, greasy slap of pizza boxes being opened. It sounded cheap. It sounded chaotic. It sounded real. "Okay, everyone," Serena's voice boomed through the speaker. She must have been standing in the center of the room, perhaps near the kitchenette. "We have 20 large pizzas from Tony's. We have the salad Aunt Linda made in the sink, don't ask, and we have the beer Mike brought. Grab a plate. But before we eat, we are going to clear the air, because I refuse to digest pepperoni with a side of lies." I held my breath. This was the moment the autopsy began. "Gordon, Denise, sit down," Serena commanded. I heard the reluctance in the shuffling of feet. I imagined my mother, in her cashmere sweater, sitting on a cold metal folding chair. I imagined my father, stripped of his armchair throne, hunched over a plastic table. "We have collected the receipts," Serena said. Her voice was calm, which made it terrifying. "We have the breakdown of costs Alara sent, and we have the total of the contribution envelopes you collected from this family over the last 5 years. Aunt Linda, what was the total count?" $4,200. Aunt Linda's voice replied. It was shaky, but firm. $4,000, Serena repeated. And Alara's spreadsheet shows she spent $30,000 of her own money. So, the math doesn't work. Denise, the money didn't go to Alara. Where is it? The silence stretched. In the background, a child laughed, oblivious to the dissection of their grandparents' integrity. We put it back into the hosting. My mother's voice quavered. It sounded thin, stripped of its usual haughty cadence. "Be specific," Serena said. "The house," my mother whispered. "The landscaping, the new backsplash, the powder room renovation. We had to make the house look right. People expect a certain standard from the Whitfields. We couldn't let you come to a house with dated wallpaper. It would be embarrassing." "Embarrassing for who?" Serena asked. "For everyone," my mother cried out, and I could hear the tears starting. "You don't understand. We aren't like the Montgomerys. We don't have old money. We have to keep up. If we look average, we disappear. I just wanted us to be special. I wanted everyone to say, 'Look at what Denise and Gordon did.' I didn't want to be just normal." I closed my eyes. There it was, the raw, bleeding nerve at the center of the infection. It wasn't malice, exactly. It was a deep, pathetic insecurity. They had cannibalized my financial future and my self-worth just to feed a hungry ghost called status. "So you stole from your daughter to paint a facade," Serena said. "You let Alara drown in debt so you could pretend to swim." "We were going to make it up to her," my father mumbled. "How?" Serena turned her attention to him. "Gordon, let's talk about you. You are the patriarch, the big man on campus. You accepted the thanks for the scotch, for the beef, for the venue. How much did you actually contribute from your own bank account, not the family pot, not Alara's card? You?" The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the building. "Gordon, nothing." "Did you pay for the food?" Silence. "Did you pay for the drinks?" Silence. "Did you pay for the cleaning?" Silence. "Zero," Serena concluded. The word hit like a gavel. "You contributed $0.00. You just provided the venue, which you renovated with your siblings' money, and the labor, which you stole from your daughter." I heard a murmur ripple through the room. It was the sound of allegiance shifting. For years, my relatives had whispered that I was moody, that I was difficult, that I was lucky to have such generous parents. Now, the lens had snapped into focus. I feel sick, a voice said. I recognized it. It was Uncle Bob. He had been one of the loudest critics of my attitude in the past. I told Alara off last year. I told her she should smile more because you guys did so much for her. I actually lectured her on gratitude while drinking scotch she paid for. We all did, Aunt Linda said softly. Alara, if you can hear this, or if someone tells you, I am sorry. We didn't know. We thought we were helping. We thought the money was going to you. Tears pricked my eyes. Hot and fast. I hadn't expected an apology. I had expected anger. I had expected them to blame me for ruining the night. But the truth, when laid bare on a folding table under harsh fluorescent lights, has a way of cutting through the noise. Then, a gravelly voice spoke up. It was Great Uncle Benny. He was 80 years old, hard of hearing, and rarely spoke. You know, Benny said, his voice slow and deliberate. I drove 4 hours to get here. My back hurts. I can't eat the pizza because of my heartburn. But I didn't come for the beef tenderloin, Gordon, and I didn't come for your new quartz countertops, Denise. The room went quiet. I came to see my family, Benny continued. I came to see the kids grow up. I came to shake your hand. If we sat on the floor and ate crackers, I would still come, you two. You traded the reality of this family for a picture of it, and that is a damn shame, because the people in this room are worth more than your furniture. I let out a sob. It was involuntary, a sharp intake of breath that echoed in the empty cabin. Uncle Benny was right. The perfect party had been a cage. This messy, chaotic, cheap potluck in a community center, this was the family I had missed. My phone screen lit up. Incoming call Mom. I stared at the photo of her. It was a picture I had taken 2 years ago at the party, where she looked glamorous and I looked exhausted in the background. She was calling me. She probably wanted to explain. She probably wanted to cry. She probably wanted me to tell her it was okay, to absorb her shame like I always did. I reached out a finger. I hovered over the green button. Then, I pulled my hand back. I let it ring. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. I wasn't doing it to be cruel. I was doing it because the dynamic had to break. If I answered now, I would just be the fixer again. I would be the emotional sponge. I needed to let her sit in the discomfort. I needed her to look at the people she had deceived without me there to smooth the edges. The ringing stopped. She isn't answering. My mother's voice came through the speaker, small and defeated. Good, Miles whispered into his microphone. Good for you, Alara. Then Miles spoke up, his voice moving away from the microphone as he addressed the room. She isn't going to answer. Aunt Denise, she is done. You don't get to summon her anymore. I just want to tell her, my mother started, then choked up. Tell her later, Serena said. Tonight, you listen. You listen to the people you lied to, and you eat the pizza. Update, Alara. Miles whispered back into the phone. The vibe has settled. It's weirdly nice. The kids are playing tag. Uncle Bob is sharing a beer with Mike. Nobody is looking at your parents with admiration anymore, but nobody is screaming at them either. They are just ignoring them. Your parents are sitting at the end of the table, eating off paper plates, looking very small, and for the first time, nobody is asking, where is Alara? Because they finally understand why you aren't here. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 11:30, 30 minutes to midnight. The countdown was approaching. The climax of the night was drawing near. My family was gathered in a basement. Stripping away the varnish of decades, I stood up. My legs felt shaky. I looked at the car keys on the table. I had made my point. I had exposed the ledger. I had frozen the credit. I had vanished. But Uncle Benny's words echoed in my head. I came for the people. I wasn't a servant anymore. I wasn't a bankroll. I was Alara. And if I stayed in this cabin, hiding in the dark, I was still letting my parents dictate my holiday. I was still reacting to them. To truly win, to truly change the game, I had to stop hiding. I picked up the keys. I had a 3-hour drive to get back, but I had left the cabin hours ago, just after sending the scheduled text. I had been sitting in the parking lot of the Civic Hall for the last 20 minutes, listening. I wasn't 3 hours away. I was 300 feet away. I grabbed the bag from the passenger seat. It didn't contain expensive gifts or gourmet food. It contained myself. I opened the car door. The cold air of Hollow Creek hit me. But this time, it didn't feel like an assault. It felt like a fresh start. The clock ticked. 11:35. I began to walk toward the light of the Civic Hall. The digital clock on the wall above the basketball hoop clicked to 11:55. The air inside the Hollow Creek Civic Hall was thick with the smell of floor wax, pepperoni pizza, and cheap beer. It was a far cry from the scent of imported white lilies and roasted tenderloin that usually filled my parents' home at this hour. But as I pushed open the heavy metal doors, I realized it smelled better. It smelled honest. I stepped inside. I was not wearing an apron. I was not holding a clipboard. I was not rushing to refill a champagne bucket. I was wearing my winter coat. My hair was windblown from the walk across the parking lot, and in my hands, I carried two very simple things: a bag of store-bought pretzels and a bottle of non-alcoholic sparkling apple cider. The heavy door clanged shut behind me, a sound that cut through the murmur of the room like a gunshot. Heads turned. The chatter died down instantly. The kids on the tumbling mats froze mid-jump. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the vending machine in the corner. I walked into the room. I didn't rush. I didn't look down. I walked with the steady, measured pace of a guest who had every right to be there. My father, Gordon, was sitting at a folding table near the center of the room. He looked older under the harsh fluorescent lights. His posture, usually so erect and commanding, was slumped. When he saw me, he stood up instinctively. Old habits die hard. He looked ready to bark an order, or perhaps to scold me for being late. "Elara," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the large hall. "You made the whole family." He started to worry, or maybe look bad. "I didn't make the family do anything," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and loud enough to be heard without shouting. "I just stopped doing a job I never applied for. We thought you weren't coming." My mother, Denise, said. She was sitting next to him, clutching a paper napkin. Her eyes were red. "We thought you abandoned us." "I didn't abandon you," I corrected her gently. "I resigned." My mother let out a small sob, covering her mouth with her hand. In the past, this was my cue. This was the moment I was supposed to rush forward, wrap my arms around her, apologize for upsetting her, and promise to fix everything. My body remembered the impulse. My muscles tensed, ready to soothe. But I didn't move. I stood still. Gripping the neck of the cider bottle, I let her cry. I let the sound of her distress hang in the air without rushing to silence it. It wasn't cruelty. It was the most necessary thing I had ever done. I was letting her feel the weight of her own emotions instead of carrying them for her. Serena stepped forward from the kitchenette area. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine respect in her eyes. She held up a clipboard. "We have established some ground rules, Elara," Serena said, addressing me but speaking to the room. "While you were out, we had a family meeting, a real one." She tapped the clipboard. "First," Serena announced, "the contribution fund is now transparent. Aunt Linda and I are co-signatories. Every dollar collected goes into a spreadsheet that everyone can see. If the money is for food, it buys food. If it is for drinks, it buys drinks. It does not buy renovations." A murmur of agreement went through the room. "Second," Serena continued, looking directly at my parents, "we are doing a forensic accounting of the donations from the past 5 years. Gordon and Denise have agreed to a repayment plan. They will be reimbursing every family member for the funds that were misappropriated for home improvements." My father flinched, but he didn't argue. He couldn't. The room was against him. "And third," Serena said, her voice dropping to a serious, legal tone, "and this is the most important one: no future contracts, rentals, or credit lines will be opened in the name of Alara Whitfield. If I see one unauthorized charge, just one, I will personally drive Alara to the police station to file charges for identity theft. Are we clear?" "We are clear," my father said. His voice was a whisper. He looked at me. For the first time in my life, he wasn't looking at his project manager. He was looking at his daughter. "Gordon," I said. "Say it." He looked around the room. He saw his brother Bob drinking a beer. He saw his nieces eating pizza. He saw the people he had tried so hard to impress, and he saw that they didn't care about the crystal glasses. They were happy. "I got used to it," my father said. The words came out rusty, like machinery that hadn't been used in years. "I got used to you fixing everything. I got used to taking the credit. And I was wrong." It wasn't a poetic speech. It wasn't a movie moment with swelling violins. It was a grunted admission from a man who had lost his leverage, and it was enough. "I accept that," I said. I walked over to the main table and set down the pretzels and the cider. "But here are my terms," I said, turning to face the room. "From today on, I am a guest. If you want a party, you plan it. If you want food, you buy it. If you want perfect, you pay for it with your own money, your own sweat, and your own time. I am done being the default setting for this family." For a second, nobody moved. The ultimatum hung in the air, sharp and absolute. Then, from the back of the room, Uncle Benny began to clap. It was a slow, rhythmic clap. Then Miles joined in. Then Aunt Linda. Within seconds, the basement was filled with applause. It wasn't polite applause. It was the sound of people cheering for a prisoner who had just walked out of jail. 2 minutes to midnight," someone shouted. The mood shifted instantly. The heaviness evaporated, replaced by the chaotic, joyful energy of a countdown. People scrambled to fill plastic cups. Kids ran to find their parents. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Miles. He handed me a red plastic cup. "Apple cider?" he asked, grinning. "The best vintage," I said, pouring a splash from my bottle. I looked over at my parents. They were still sitting at the table. They looked smaller, stripped of their stage and their script. My mother wiped her eyes and looked at the paper plate in front of her. Then, slowly, she reached out and took a slice of pizza. It was a small gesture, but it was real. She was eating cold pizza in a basement, and the world hadn't ended. 10, the room shouted in unison. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of freedom. 9. I looked at my hands. They weren't chapped from scrubbing dishes. They weren't trembling with anxiety. They were holding a cheap plastic cup, and they were steady. 8. Serena caught my eye and nodded. The ledger was balanced. 765. I looked around at the faces of my cousins, my aunts, my uncles. They weren't looking at the decor. They were looking at each other. They were laughing. 432. My father stood up. He didn't walk towards the center of the room to make a speech. He just stood there, next to my mother, and raised his paper cup toward me. It was an acknowledgement, a surrender. 1 Happy New Year. The room erupted, noisy noisemakers, the popping of cheap confetti cannons, and the distant boom of fireworks from outside filled the hall. Someone started singing Auld Lang Syne off-key. I took a sip of my apple cider. It was sweet, crisp, and cold. It tasted better than the $1,000 champagne I had served last year. I wasn't in the kitchen. I wasn't worrying about the stains on the carpet. I wasn't checking my bank account in panic. I was standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by people who finally knew my name, not just my function. I looked at my parents one last time. They would have to learn how to be human beings again, without me as their crutch. It would be hard for them, but that wasn't my problem to solve. I smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. This was the surprise I had promised. I hadn't just vanished to teach them a lesson. I had vanished so I could reappear. And this time, the woman standing in the civic hall wasn't a service provider. She was Alara. And for the first time in 33 years, that was enough. Thank you so much for listening to Alara's story of liberation and truth. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment below with your country or city, and let's share our thoughts on family boundaries. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Veronica Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button so we can share this message with more people who need to hear it.